everyone, good evening. I'm Sohani Rungta and I'm the Student Relationship Coordinator at Integrated Marketing Association. So before we begin the event, I would love to briefly introduce to you IMA, the Integrated Marketing Association. We are a student-led organization bridging the gap between the classroom learning and real-world marketing leadership. Our goal is to create a meaningful industry exposure, hands-on experiences among brand strategy, media, luxury, CPG, and beyond. So far, we have organized in this year 10 events with reaching over 500 plus students with an average turnout of 70 per event. So the engagement and the momentum this year has been incredible for us. And you definitely don't want to miss our marquee event. That is the IMA Summit. It's going to be held on March 28th. And this is going to be our biggest event. We have industry leaders who are going to speak across different sectors. So if you're interested, you should definitely volunteer. The QR code is there. So you could become one of the volunteers and help us shape this experience even better. So thank you again for being here. And you could just continue this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kathleen, and thank you, Suhani. So I have the great privilege to introduce to you two amazing female leaders that are prominent in the beauty industry today. I happen to have a great relationship with Lori Singer. I have watched her. We kind of grew up together in the industry, and I've always admired her, and she's a buddy and a friend, serious girl crush. And I really adore this woman, and I'd love to read her bio to you as well. We're going to welcome Dara Portnoi, who's the Director of Marketing. Before I forget, Lori is the president of Parlux, and Dara is the Director of Marketing for Parlux. And we're going to talk about women in leadership. This is our fourth panel on this subject, and we're going to talk about mentorship and the importance of mentorship as women move into moments of higher levels of leadership. But before, I have a few remarks I'll make before we start the Q&A, but I do want to introduce our esteemed panel of guests. So first, I'd like to introduce you to Lori Singer. She is the president of Parlux. Lori has been a transformative force at Parlux since assuming the role of president in 2019. A visionary leader with a unique ability to merge cultural influence with prestige fragrance. She has redefined how brands engage with modern consumers while preserving their luxury heritage. Lori drives the company's global strategy, fostering innovation, evolving business models, and securing strategic licenses and partnerships that propel growth. Under Lori's leadership, Parlux delivered one of the beauty's biggest success stories, the launch of fragrance of Billie Eilish's debut fragrance and her subsequent collection as one of the fastest growing artist fragrance lines in history. She also revitalized the legacy fragrance house Vince Camuto and launched Drake's Better World Fragrance House, restaged Paris Hilton's fragrance brand with the launch of her 30th fragrance, Iconic. Expanding beyond traditional beauty categories, Lori led the introduction of Shop Men's grooming line in collaboration with LeBron James and Maverick Carter. Before joining Parlux, Lori built an impressive career at Coty as Group Vice President of Global Marketing, driving growth for some of the most iconic names in luxury fragrances, including Marc Jacobs, Balenciaga, Calvin Klein, and Vera Wang. Her expertise in crafting compelling brand narratives and consumer-centric strategies laid the foundation for her success at Parlux. Under Lori's leadership, Parlux has embraced a digital-first strategy, launched worldwide direct-to-consumer businesses for brands such as Billie Eilish and Paris Hilton. She has also forged exclusive partnerships that have redefined the industry's retail landscape. Her innovative approach to distribution and brand storytelling has set new standards, earning her recognition as one of the top 50 women brand marketers. Lori's impact in the beauty industry has been widely celebrated. I can't tell you how many times I've sat in the room and watched this great lady get up and accept an award all the time. She just very quickly, she received widely celebrated honors 2024 WWD and Beauty Inc.'s Top 50 Women in Power. Also, the prestigious Cosmetic Executive Women's Achiever Award. She also plays a key role in shaping the industry's future as a board member of both Cosmetic Executive Women and the Fragrance Foundation, further solidifying her leadership and influence. Through strategic partnerships, cultural foresight, and digital innovation, Lori Singer is not just shaping the future of fragrance, she's redefining the future of beauty. And that's just a few things I could say about her. More. Really awesome, right? Yay, Lori. And now I'd like to introduce Dara. Dara is the Global Marketing Director at Parlux, and Dara is an experienced beauty industry professional with a dynamic career across leading brands. She's a graduate of the University of Michigan who started her career at Coty and Victoria's Secret Beauty. From there, she honed her expertise in global marketing and brand strategy. She currently works at Parlux, where she has been for the last 3 years, and most recently received the promotion to Global Marketing Director. Dara leads major fragrance initiatives, including Billie Eilish and We Wore What, when her innovative approach to brand storytelling and product development has driven remarkable success. Her passion for creating unique consumer experiences and her deep understanding of market trends make her a standout leader in the beauty world. So welcome, Dara. Yeah. And so just a few comments I want to make about this program. Before we get started with the Q&A, I just want to say that for me, this has been a passion project for about 4 years now. This beautiful culture of this beautiful community of students here at NYU. I've had the great privilege to teach here for 9 years now as an adjunct professor. And what I love about NYU's community and integrated marketing and the graduate studies program is that you are a multicultural community. You are from China, you are from India, you're from the Middle East, students from Europe, from Latin America, from Canada, and of course, American students. And for me, that is such an innovative environment to learn. And I always say I learn as much from my students, maybe more than I teach them, because I really love the multicultural aspect of this community. And as you know, those of you I see my students for my C-suite class, I do teach C-suite leadership this semester, and every year at the end of the semester, my students come up to me and they say two things. One, how can I become a leader? Many students come from cultures around the world that don't support female leadership, don't promote it. And so that's the question I get. And then the second question is, how can I get into the beauty industry? So I wrote a little deck a few years ago called Let's Create a Platform about Women in Leadership in the Beauty Industry, and kind of passed it around. The administration fell a little bit on deaf ears until the great Kathleen Rennie saw this little idea I had, this silly little deck. It wasn't a silly little deck, it was a great little deck, but it was just a little deck. And she said, let's do it, let's make it happen. And so this is our fourth Women in Leadership panel today. We started in 2024, we did two, we did one last year and this year. And of course, it's Women's History Month this month. And so we're really celebrating women. But I do want to also say that it's for the guys in the room too, because, we all want to see our sisters, our girlfriends, our future wives be able to rise into leadership positions, understand the challenges they face, and the triumphs of success. And so we don't make this just about women, although there are a lot of women in the room. It is also about the young gentlemen here today. So just a couple of statistics, and then we're going to start with the Q&A. This is just a little bit of statistics about women in leadership at the CEO level in the world today. as of June 2025, of the Fortune 500 companies, there are only 11% of CEO positions that are held by women. That's America's largest list of public companies. Women lead 55 of the Fortune 500 companies, again, representing, it's higher than last year. Last year it was 10%. This year it's 11%. So is it improving? Yes, but it is very slow in moving upward. But what's interesting, of the Fortune 500 CEOs that are women, that 11%, most of them were promoted internally. And what does that speak to? Mentorship. The fact that you can have within your organization a leader that is willing to mentor you, that you can learn from, that you can be inspired by. And that's what we're going to talk about with Lori and Dara today, is this notion of recognizing talent as a leader and mentoring young talent. And as a young executive moving up the ladder, to have a senior mentor, it makes all the difference in the world. And also, according to research, there is research around this. Consulting firm Korn Ferry did a research project on women in leadership in 2024. And basically, what that research revealed was that companies look to the future. They want women's leadership skills. They're very much in demand in today's corporate environment. Women CEOs, according to Korn Ferry's research, exhibit greater humility and emotional intelligence than the general group of CEOs, along with equal risk-taking, assertiveness, and persistence. Within the beauty industry, however, the numbers are not great either. While women are well represented at the lower levels of management, men continue to dominate the executive and C-suite positions, with studies showing only a small fraction of top beauty brands are led by women. I can name them probably on my 10 years. The number of female senior executive positions in the beauty industry is at its highest level. If you look at director, senior director, VP, president, women currently hold about 29% of these senior management roles. However, when you look at the top 20 beauty manufacturers today, women hold only 15% of CEO positions. This is in spite of the fact that 69% of the beauty industry workforce is women, and 64% are at low levels. And it is business that caters largely to women, markets to women, earns revenues from women, and has a dominant female consumer. So while women are well represented in the lower level and mid-tier levels, and it is getting better at the senior levels, men continue to dominate the executive and C-suite positions. So I ask you, do we still have a long way to go? And the answer is yes. But you are the next generation of leaders, you. And so we want to share, I get emotional now, I'm getting emotional, but we do want to share our wisdom, the older women in the room that have been around a while, with the next generation, so that you can really lead with confidence and the support of leadership knowledge. And I just want to say that these conversations are very, very important at NYU. Again, with Kathleen's support and Marissa and the NYU team. Thank you so much for this platform and the opportunity to talk about women in leadership. So we're going to focus now on the questions, and I'm going to sit down and hang with the gang. But we're really going to start our discussion around leadership journey. Okay. So my first question is, what do you look for in early talent before titles, experience, or resumes?
So what I look for in early talent, and the first thing I look for is curiosity. I want to see people who ask questions, who are really hungry to learn, people who are passionate, people who are thoughtful about the way they approach the business. Can you not hear us? Yes. Okay. They can. So, which have moving, or should we call them? Yeah, a little bit. Okay, so hear me now? Okay. Okay, so curiosity, passion, hunger, drive. I think what's really important is that skills can be taught, about mindset, right? So sometimes you have the perfect candidate on a piece of paper on the resume, but it's really what's not there. It's those soft skills, and it's showing people who sort of raise their hand, want to take it to the next level, want to understand the bigger picture, and don't just do what's asked for them. And I think Dara is a perfect example. She started working with me when she was an intern. And as an intern, you're given a lot of stuff to do, and some of it's pretty crappy, quite honestly. But you know, she not only did she do everything that the team asked her to do, but she went above and beyond. She would ask what else could she do. She would ask questions, but make sure she did it in the right way. That she took the time that when the team had time to spend with her, she really did her research. She did her homework. She just demonstrated that drive and that hunger to learn. And it absolutely stood out in my mind because from an intern, she was someone that I remember. And I think that that initiative and that engagement are really what sets the foundation for a long-term learning.
So let's talk a little bit more about your leadership journey. Excuse me, Lori. How would you define how your leadership has, how would you define how your leadership has evolved over time? Talk to us about your journey.
Sure. So I think, you know, in the early days, I thought leadership meant being the boss, being the one who set the direction, had all the answers, was in charge of the show. And what I learned throughout my career is that leadership isn't just about title. Leadership isn't something that you're handed by your boss or by an organization. Leadership is something that you can practice every single day. And you don't have to be vice president or president or have a fancy C-suite title to be a leader. An intern or a brand manager can be a leader. And I think an example of this for me is that, you know, I had a situation recently where I had two different brand managers on different brands come to me, and they were, you know, I was just picking their brain about what was going on in the department. And what I was hearing was that they were feeling like there wasn't a lot of communication and collaboration between various teams, and that they felt like they didn't know what some of the other brands were working on, and could we formalize that, and how could they, you know, be more involved and just have more visibility to what was going on. And I said, absolutely, you know, I'll think about that. We have regular team meetings with everyone. I said, but by the way, you guys don't need your boss in the room to come together. Like, you can say, hey guys, why don't we hold a brand manager meeting once a month? Why don't we bring our lunches, sit in the conference room? Why don't we share ideas? And you know, the interesting thing is I gave that same advice to two different people. And you know what? One of them took the lead. They took that action. They set up that brand manager meeting, and they're a leader. That showed me they took my idea, not to say it was a great idea, but it's worth trying, right? If they're feeling like frustrated or that they were in a silo. So I think that's just such an example of how you can be a leader at any level. And you really don't have to wait for somebody to appoint you as a leader. And I think we can all remember that in our daily lives. And I think for me, leadership is about, you know, creating clarity and being transparent, honesty, integrity, and really looking out for your team, you know, investing in the people who work with you, who are the keys to the success.
So talk about that moment when you realized you were moving into senior level positions and you were becoming a leader. What was that like? What was that moment?
So for me, that moment when I was working on the Calvin Klein fragrance business, and I don't know if any of you are watching the show with John Kennedy and Carol, but let me tell you, it is accurate, okay? The white walls, the black paper clips. You could not have a silver paper clip. You would get in big trouble if you had a silver paper clip. I remember once I got flowers, my parents sent me flowers to the office and they were all white. And it was just so not my mother. She's a very colorful person. And I called her, thank you for the flowers. I'm like, why did you send me white flowers? I'm just curious. And she said, you know, when I called the florist, they told me you weren't allowed to have colored flowers in the office. And I think every florist in New York had that memo from Calvin. It's just a funny time. It brings back a lot of amazing memories. But when I started working on Calvin Klein, I was the marketing director for the brand in Germany, which at the time was a huge $200 million business. It was modeled off of actually Calvin and Kelly and their marriage and their historical love story. And from there, I moved on to CK1, which was one of the greatest successes in all of the fragrance industry, the first genderless fragrance really setting trends. But my goal was, as I moved from brand to brand to brand, I wanted to get promoted to be vice president of the whole bit. I wanted to really oversee the portfolio, set the strategy, and really look at that. And when that job came open, I was actually passed over for it. And it was heartbreaking, and I was so disappointed, and I didn't understand why. I felt I was the most qualified person for the job. They actually brought in someone from the outside. We were owned by Unilever at the time, so they brought in someone from Unilever Canada who had worked at ice cream business, believe it or not in beauty. And it was a good opportunity for me to reflect. I really sought out my boss and her boss and other peers of them and other cross-functional teams to start to ask the questions of what did I need to do for people to see me in that role? Like, I'm sure you've heard the saying, like dress for the part that you want, not what you are, act like the position you're looking for, not what you are. And same thing, and I think in my head, I thought I was doing a bunch of things right, and I was, but there was more to do. So I really incorporated that feedback, and sure enough, a year later, that was the guy just didn't work out. He was let go, unfortunately, but fortunately for me, I got that promotion that I had been waiting for. So that was the moment for me. I now became a boss to my peers who are also my friends, which was challenging, weird, awkward. So I had to learn how to do that. And I was now running an almost $1 billion business. And that came with huge opportunity, but also huge accountability and challenges. I was, presented to the board and the executive committee and real senior leadership both internally and externally. And I had a seat at the table, but I kind of had to learn how to earn my seat and, own my voice and really what that meant. But that was really the moment for me when I kind of felt like I'm truly a leader. So even though we talked about it doesn't matter what your title is, it was the moment of responsibility and accountability that happened for me.
So talk to us, maybe talk a little bit about mentorship now, and talk a little bit about your philosophy. Why is mentorship so important for you, and what is your leadership philosophy?
So mentorship is so important to me because of all the people who have helped shape me along the way. I'm very fortunate that I've worked for people who have taken me under their wing, who have championed me, who have advocated for me. And it really started early in my career. I was working at Revlon. I was a marketing assistant. I'd been there about 2 years. And they brought in a new vice president of marketing. And she was new to me, but she was actually the vice president of sales. And she was an amazing, charismatic, fabulous leader. But she knew everything about sales. She knew the retail landscape. She knew the whole sales force. She knew nothing about marketing. And even though there were like 3 layers in between me and her, I was an assistant, that was a manager, director, all these other layers. She and I started to spend time together, and she kind of took me under her wing. And she realized, A, I had studied marketing, B, I had been doing the job in marketing and I knew what was going on. And C, I wasn't threatened. I wasn't someone who was passed over for her job.
Right.
I wasn't, trying to like prove to her all the time how smart I was when I was, but not at the level like of her boss, sort of that direct boss. And she really saw something in me. And what ended up happening was fantastic because she shared with me all her knowledge about sales. I had no exposure. And back in the day, this was before emails and before cell phones, and I don't want to date myself, but we had a weekly call where she basically sent out a voicemail to the 50 people in the sales force across the country. She would give them the highlights of what was going on. And, that had never been done for marketing before, but she did sales, so she wanted to do that. And I remember after like a few months of her doing it, she let me take over this call. And so the fact that she, really believed in me and let me take on more responsibility, helped me to get to the next level and taught me so much. And so I feel the tremendous responsibility to pay that forward. And I want to help the next generation. I love our industry. I've been in the beauty industry from day one. I'm a lifer and I love it. I'm so passionate about it. And it's the next generation of leaders. And I feel that it's a responsibility, but it's also something that I love doing. I mean, nothing makes me happier than to talk to young people and in their various stages of their careers and help guide them and help solve problems and open doors and make connections and whatever I can do to impart any knowledge, just gives me a lot of pleasure and pride and it feels really good to give back.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
Exactly.
So we're gonna talk, send our attention over to Dara. And, I know you've had a great privilege to work with Lily. Just tell us a little bit about your experience and your professional growth and what mentorship has meant to you.
So I met Lori when I was actually an intern for her at Cody, and I was thinking back, I think it was 2013 now. And I remember Lori walking into a room, she was several levels above me, of course. And I was just enamored by how confident, how strong, and what an empathetic leader she was to the entire team. And like Lori said, I made it my job to stand out during my internship time, come in early, leave late, do things that not every intern at the time was doing. And then, of course, I wanted to garner this relationship with Lori because, spoiler alert, she is my mentor. And after the internship ended, that mentorship did not. So I continued to follow up, ask her, how things were going, fill her in on my life. I remember that fall I had gone back to college. And that summer we were working on the launch of Decadence, a fragrance by Marc Jacobs. So I decided to take a picture of Decadence in my University of Michigan dorm room where Lori was also an alum. And I used Snapchat. I used the filter that you could swipe to get the Michigan Ann Arbor, old Snapchat, and sent it to her. And I was like, Decadence in Ann Arbor. I'm like, how's everything? How's the launch doing? So really making it a point to keep up that relationship. And then ultimately, her and
Impersonated new Snapchat.
yeah. Exactly. And, the mentorship didn't stop there when my internship ended. I ended up coming back to Cody for an internship the following year that she had helped me to get, passed me off to another team. I always kept Lori in the back of my mind while I was navigating through different roles within the industry, even when I left the beauty industry for a short stint of time. And then now, of course, I owe all of my career success to her now that I am at Parlux as the director of marketing. She is not only my mentor, but she is my boss, or my mentor, but not my boss too. So I owe everything to mentorship.
By the way, I didn't pass you on to another. I wanted to expose you to a different opportunity. Like I touched you.
No, in fact, when we were talking about this panel tonight, Laura said, oh, I know someone I can put on the mentorship topic, and Dara was the first thought. Let's talk a little bit, Dara, what's one lesson that you learned in your time working with her?
So I've learned a lot of lessons. I think one that is, the most relevant to this conversation in women in leadership is just how powerful it can be when a leader believes in you. And Lori has believed in me throughout my entire career, has always challenged me, championed me, given me feedback, even when I didn't always want it. And, when I received my promotion recently to become a director of marketing, Lori called me in her office and she was like, congrats, I got you something. She handed me a book that was titled The Making of a Manager. And how she phrased it to me was so impactful. She had said, you did it. You got this promotion. You have done incredible. But there's more, you're not done here. This isn't the finish line. There's still tons more to learn. And And, she believed in me. I felt empowered that, I did just get a promotion, but there was more I could be doing, and she was gonna be along for the ride and wanted me to succeed in that new role as well.
That's good. That's great. Okay, we're gonna talk a little bit about leadership style. So Lori, turning my attention back to you. How do authentic leadership and emotional intelligence show up in your day-to-day leadership as president of us?
So I think authentic leadership is about showing up as yourself as a leader, not as someone expects the definition of what a leader should be, right? It's about individualizing that leadership style. And for me, emotional intelligence plays a really big factor in that, because for me, I like to think not only with my head, but also with my heart. I am a very empathetic leader. I really take the time to read the room. I think there's so much in that sort of EQ, IQ conversation that it's not just what is being said, and sometimes it's what's not being said. I look around, I can read body language, I can see who I might keep pissed off, who's having a bad day, who's happy. But it just gives me insight, and for so much of that, I also trust my gut. There's a lot of gut there with that emotional intelligence. And I think that people don't expect leaders to be perfect, but what they do expect is for them to be transparent, for them to be fair, for them to be consistent, to approach leadership with that mindset. Because as a leader, you're making decisions with imperfect information all the time, and putting out those fires and just really doing the best you can, just like everybody else. And it doesn't matter as you grow up the ladder, climb up the ladder, you still have challenges, you still have problems of just different ones, right? But you still have crappy work to do no matter what level you're at, by the way. There's like people think you get to the top and all of a sudden everything you work on is like the most amazing project. But no matter where you are, there's still stuff that you love to do, stuff that's just like. But I think, as at the end of the day, we're running a business, but the business is only as good as the team of people that you have participating in and contributing to it. And that's why it's so important to invest in various people. And it's something that I take really seriously. I make it my business to meet with every single person on my entire team at least once a year. I try for twice, but my travel schedule usually doesn't allow it. But for 1 hour, they get 1 hour with me, and we sit down, and literally, it's so important to understand who they are as people, right? We spend so much of our time at work these days, but we all have lives outside of work, and some people want to share that, some don't, and that's perfectly fine. But I kind of want to know who you are as a person, and whatever you feel like sharing with me, it's your hour. If you want to talk about your career trajectory and want, mentorship and advice or guidance or frustration that you're not moving up or whatever it might be, great. If you want to tell me all about your wedding plans or about your job that you just got, amazing. If you want to sit and discuss the latest shoe sale in Saks or whatever, that's great too. But I think it just gives that opportunity, that emotional intelligence to really get to know people on a different level. And the other thing that I do, and again, we're not a super large company. So we're not a L'Oreal or a Lauder. If I was president of those organizations, I would not be able to do this. But I interview every single person that we bring on the team before we hire them. And we have now about 40 people out in the field in our sales force across the country. And every single one, I met 5, but we're adding 5 new positions. I met 5 of them last week, just 15 minutes. But you know what? It's a gut check, right? I mean, obviously they've met with 1 or 2 people before me, but it's fit is so important, culture is so important. But it's also, I think, I want to send a message to them that they are an important member of our team, no matter if they're a retail coordinator or a retail director out there. No matter who they are, I want to make that connection, put a face behind the name, and let them just have a few minutes of my time and share that and meet with them. And that way, when I do meet them in person, we've already established that. So again, those are just some elements of, I think, the emotional intelligence and how I bring that into my role.
Absolutely, absolutely. Absolutely. So in my C-suite class and in our leadership discussions, we talk about the concept of a level 5 leader. And that's the leader that's defined by humility and fierce resolve. It's a Harvard case study, and we talk about, is that right, is that wrong, they're good to be tough, they would be humble, and still have a fierce approach to business. So what do you think of that concept, the level 5 leader, and does it resonate with you?
Yeah, I think there's elements that definitely resonate with me. I think the most effective leaders don't need to be the loudest voice in the room. I think, I'm sure you've heard the saying that we were all given 2 ears and 1 mouth, because we shouldn't be listening more than we should be talking. And for me, that's really important. I always have an opinion, Dara will tell you that, but I also want to hear everyone else's opinion. I make it a point, especially the more junior people, to try to make them feel comfortable to share their opinion and not feel intimidated. And I think that, it's all part of the process of really, leadership and how we drive the business. And I don't believe that fierce resolve, and really, I don't think they're necessarily opposites. I think that they can work together and complement each other to really be an effective leader. And I think, and another component of that is being willing to embrace change as a leader is so important. The ability to pivot, whether it's because there's new information from your team or there's a new situation that you're faced with, and how you embrace that change, what you control. And so just an example of that is, when we first signed the Billie Eilish license, it's actually during the pandemic. And I've been doing this, as Pam mentioned, for a long time. And I've created fragrances with many celebrities, many fashion designers before. And normally when you have a first meeting, excuse me, you sit together, and we usually come with a lot of stimuli for packaging and bottle ideas and fragrances for them to smell. And some people know exactly what they want, and other people just need to, I like this, I hate this, etc. But we're usually sitting together, either in their home, their office, a hotel suite. And with Billie, it was over Zoom. And I was so concerned that how are we going to do this? It felt so impersonal that we were going to be on Zoom, and how are we not going to sit next to each other and look at things and share things? And so that was like this moment of everybody's change, and my team that I had really sits in, how are we going to do this? And I have to say, Billie had her phone, and she ended up taking her phone and like zooming me around her room, and I saw her artwork and her posters and her bed. She was sitting on her bed, and eating. And but she took her phone and then she panned her fragrance bottle. She had a collection of over 100 different fragrance bottles. And she loves fragrance so much that she just sat there and went through each one and told me why she loves them, what they smell like to her, what the memories were, how she liked the packaging, the font, the sizes. And what happened was, instead of it being impersonal, it became so intimate. Like I felt like I was actually there sitting on her bed with her. And it really captured something that like the perfect mood board could ever capture, right? It was like this unique insight that has shaped a brand that's become one of the top ranking fragrances globally. So I think the lesson there is to, to really have to use those skills and embrace change as a leader, and figure out how to do that, and listen to your team and work together to try to find the right solution.
Absolutely, absolutely. So Dara, what's it like working for this human being sitting here? And under her leadership style, does it affect the way you show up as a leader?
Well, first I wanted to say, going back to the, that you meet with everybody. You even met with me as an intern at Cody, so you even have made it a point to take me on. I do remember that. Yeah, but working under this type of leadership, the humility and fierce resolve, and working with a leader who's so empathetic, really creates safety for me and my team. We are so often challenged when we go into meetings, and there's so many opinions, but you want to make sure that when you speak, you feel that you can be as creative, as innovative, and as confident as you want. And working with leaders like Lori, make that all the more possible. I think in working in fragrance is super subjective. You might like a woody fragrance, you might like a gourmand, vanilla. So it is really important when you're sitting around a table to hear everybody's opinion and feel comfortable to give it. You know, at different age ranges also are sitting around the table. Sometimes I'm more close to the target consumer, sometimes the girls on my team are. But I also, you know, want to empower my team the same way that I feel empowered when going into a meeting with Lori.
Ask
That's
the
the best.
wisdom alone. So, Lori, let's get back to you for a minute. And we're gonna talk about your ability to balance being a strategist and also creating space for creativity, fostering innovation, but also managing change. So I know that's a lot in one sentence, but talk to us a little bit about your strategy approach and then your ability to innovate.
So I think it's the leader's role to set the vision and the strategic direction, right, for the brand or for the business. But when it comes to sort of the innovation and the creativity, that's where that's really coming from the team. And sort of everyone having a voice and building, innovation is what drives the, you know, really the path of fragrance. And for me, it's, as Dara mentioned, it's sort of setting up the team to feel safe, to feel comfortable, to express their opinions, to also know that it's okay to fail, right? Everything isn't a success, and I say that we learn as much, if not more, from our failures as we do our successes. Obviously, we have to weigh the results and the risk of failure versus success, but I want everyone on my team to feel really comfortable that they have a voice. And I also, you know, there's a saying, I'm sure you've also heard, that if you're the smartest person in the room, then you're in the wrong room. I believe that strongly, and I actually have a saying that I go by, which is, I want to be wrong. Like, I don't want to be right all the time. You know, because when I'm wrong, that means that one of my team's ideas have won. And that's a victory for everyone. And I'm not the smartest person in the room, and it's important that they know that. So I say that often. I want to be wrong, guys. Like, I'm not right. Don't just guess it. I didn't hire all of you to be yes people. I want to be challenged. I'm going to have a strong opinion. I definitely am. But you know what? Sway me. Tell me why I'm wrong and give me that insight. An example of this was we were working on Paris Hilton. We were getting ready to launch our 30th fragrance iconic at Ulta Beauty. And we had briefed a creative agency to create the ad campaign for Iconic. And the brief to them was to blend iconic Paris Hilton from the early 2000s, right? Think The Simple Life, juicy tracksuits, Paris as a party girl, blend it with iconic Paris Hilton of today. She's a mother, she's a business mogul, she's a children's advocate, she's evolved in those 20 years. And blend that together and give us back a campaign that is iconic. Long story short, this agency gave us 3 different proposals and they failed every time. They just weren't hitting the mark. And I was sort of like beating a dead horse. And I'm like, oh, let's go back. Let's ask them to try this or try that. And, you know, I just want to stay the course. I want to stay on budget. We already paid for it. And, you know, one of my team members had the idea and they're like, well, what if we just skip the agency? Let's just scrap them for a minute. And we knew the photographer that we were shooting with is someone Paris wanted to work with. And they're like, why don't we just empower the photographer to come up with a concept? Like, he's the one shooting it. Why don't we see what he could do? And, you know, my initial reaction was to defend my original idea. Just go, let's take the path, let's brief the agency, we paid them. But I stopped and I thought about it. I'm like, you know, what have we got to lose? All right, let's do it. And I have to say, it ended up being one of our most successful campaigns. They were right. So once again, I was wrong. They were right, and that's what's important. And that, I think, for me, is about leadership and about giving those safe spaces to people on my team to come with fresh ideas. And sometimes they're going to get their ideas cast, and sometimes it's not. But I want everyone to feel like that they have a voice and a team.
So just talk a little bit about this idea of failure. You mentioned failure. We talk about it a lot in the leadership class, you know, that we learn from failure more than we learn from success if we are able to self-evaluate. And so talk to us a little bit about some of those difficult conversations that we have to have when someone has let you down or is not performing properly. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, difficult conversations are never easy, but I think the best way to have them is to be direct and respectful and be timely with your feedback. And sometimes it's not even about failure, or it's not about, doing something wrong or letting you down. Sometimes it's just the feedback of they could do something a little differently or a little bit better, approach it in a different way, or think about your audience. We present to all different people, whether it's a retailer, a licensor, or management, just how to adapt your style, so it could be really anything. And these conversations were not always easy for me to have, and they still sometimes aren't easy. I don't think any of us like having difficult conversations, right? But for me, what I find is if I address it at the time, I'm pretty much a straight shooter. I would way rather call someone in right away and just say, hey, listen, by the way, in that meeting, you did a good job, but next time, let's try this or let's do that. I find that if I don't bring that up, it's gonna sort of fester and it's gonna become bigger and it's gonna be on my mind, and every time I'm gonna keep thinking about it. So I do think taking that action as soon as you want to have that conversation is important, and I think it's making sure that your team knows that it's constructive feedback, I think sometimes growing up, everyone's used to getting just such positive reinforcement all the time that the first time you get some constructive feedback feels scary. It feels like I did something wrong, I messed up. And that's not what it's about. And even Dara, she's a rock star. She's amazing, as we've heard. But that doesn't mean that we haven't had tough conversations. That doesn't mean that I haven't shared feedback with her of something that I thought she could improve or do differently. And they're never easy, but I've gotten better in my career, and I think it's something that takes practice and just keeps doing. And as long as you're respectful, I think what it shows is that you're invested, right? Is that hopefully the person on the other end of feedback knows that you're providing that because you believe in that, and you want to see them better themselves and grow.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that, when you think about, for example, how to hire someone, which is a whole different conversation. We talk about leadership, the fact that failure makes you actually more interested and more compassionate, because you know what it's like to feel that level of rejection. We're gonna talk a little bit now about what are those challenges. So, we can talk about philosophy, but everybody faces these challenges throughout the journey of their career. So what challenges do you feel you faced as you were growing, as rising to the top? And how did you navigate? This is an example.
I think one of the biggest challenges I faced was learning to sort of find and own my own voice. I think many women are conditioned to sort of wait until you're asked for your opinion, wait until someone, comes to your turn in the room. And that's kind of hard, it's sort of that asking for permission. I have to say, when I worked at Coty, it was a culture of mostly French men. And as an American woman who had been growing up within the company and getting promoted, I often felt like I wasn't being perceived as a senior leader, and that my opinion didn't matter. So what I learned was, for me, it was all about confidence, and that confidence came from preparation. So for me, it was when I went into board meetings or executive committee meetings, and I was prepared and I knew my business inside and out, that I knew that if I was going to open my voice and add to the conversation, I could portray that confidence because I was prepared and I knew my shit, excuse my language, right? And I think for me, that was one of the biggest challenges that I faced. The other challenge, which is more of a personal level, is just being a working mom. There is no such thing as work-life balance. The word balance is a myth. Not only a working mom, a mom of two boys. I'm lucky enough, one of my sons is over here in that corner. Came to support his mom tonight, but my younger son Dylan is severely autistic. So I had a whole other journey of challenges as a special needs mom that really needed my attention outside of work, and sort of juggling all of that. And being able to be successful at work and needing to be successful at home and be a good mom was challenging. And I think part of that is what made me such an empathetic leader, that I'm there for my team. And I say to them all the time, we're running a business, but family and health, loved ones come first. At the end of the day, that's the most important thing. And if you have an issue in your life, come talk to me about it.
And I can just say that personally, myself, as a leader, I was corporate for 20 years. I left the corporate world because I wanted to be a better runner. I was working 12-hour days at that one. My big girl was asleep when I got up in the morning, I'd sleep when I got home at night, and I would sit on the train every day with tears in my eyes. And so I left the corporate world and became a consultant, never looked back. Because I didn't want to have to ask permission to go to my daughter's Christmas party or my son's soccer game. And so for me, the challenge, the leadership for me was being a mom, still being really on top of my game in the beauty industry. I want to ask you guys the same question, Derek. What do you think your challenges are or have been as you listen up for that?
I think, you know,
You're too close to it, so be careful.
Say anything.
I think Lori said it.
Okay, so I only phone call.
I think learning to accept feedback was probably one of the biggest challenges I faced. I, you know, came from a household, even growing up, where I never really received negative feedback around, what I took so personally. And also being an only child, I was my parents' pride and joy. So coming into the corporate world, you're not everyone's pride and joy, and there's a lot to learn, and you have to be comfortable taking that feedback and also realize that it's not always personal. It's like Lori said, it's a business, and you have to be okay with being uncomfortable. But any feedback that I had ever been given really just helped me realize that somebody cares about me and somebody wants to see me do better and wants me to succeed.
So we're running out of time, but we do want to, would love you both to kind of share what your message is to this next generation of leaders. Because some of them are already leaders in their careers, but for those of you who are rising to become the next generation of leaders, Lori, Dara, give us your thoughts about your advice for that.
I think just a lot, when we talk about mentorship, right, we all have a responsibility to open doors, to share knowledge, to make those connections, to normalize ambition for women. And I think for the men in the room, Pam said it earlier, but the same thing, we want to help be an advocate and an ally for your girlfriends, wives, mothers, daughters, sisters. The statistics are real. They're improving slightly, but especially in the beauty industry, right? An industry of women for women, and yet we look at the very top and it's still a really small number. So I just think that we have a responsibility. Mentorship is not optional. It's something that we really need to take seriously there. And I think, leadership, it's not something that you arrive at and that you're handed to. It's something that you can practice every single day, no matter your level, no matter what you're doing. It's really up to you of what, how you want to incorporate that. That's every person has it, and then has the opportunity to be a leader. And I think, to just remember that as you grow in your leadership and that you have teams that work for you, that while we're driving the business, I said it earlier, but at the end of the day, we're only as good as our teams and we're only as good as our people. So it's so critical to invest in them and to really believe in them and help grow them and shape them. It's critical to everyone's stuff.
And my advice would be that we talked about it earlier, but that leadership or being a leader is not based on your title. So you can be a leader at any level, like Lori said earlier. So my advice would be to ask questions, stay connected, learn new perspectives, and find people and mentors around you that challenge you and want to better you in life, in your career.
So I want to just thank you both. You're amazing. We want to, I think, open up for questions. Yes. So please raise your hand. We'll answer some questions. By the way, we do have fragrances. You could have.
Yeah.
I have a video. I've never to play the video. Okay.
Play our video. Let them ask their question. Ask the word. Pump your fragrances, make sure you don't leave them here. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alright. Sorry, thank you. So you mentioned that balance was that new. I say this very often, but I would really like to know, like, how do you describe juggling like so many things, like being a mom, working full time, because I come to school full time and also work full time, still try to have a social life, and sometimes I'm like, whoa, what is going on? Try to balance it, but can't do it. So
Yeah. So I think for me, it's about work-life integration, not balance. I balance like a seesaw. It's like one end's up, the other's up, right? For me, there are days like I'm firing on all cylinders, like everything's going really well at work and home, and I feel super well. And then there's days I feel like I'm on the verge of a nervous breakdown. So that's just normal, right? But I think it's about being present where you are when you are, and as long, well, however that works best for you. And look, you can't do everything. That's a reality. There are only 24 hours in a day. So you need to pick and choose and prioritize, but you need to prioritize yourself as well. Work is important. You have to put in the hours, you have to put in what's needed, but you need to take time for yourself and wellness and all of those things that are, whether it's family, friends, loved ones, hobbies, etc. It's so critical. But I think it's about integrating it into each other rather than trying to think about that.
Emma? Oh, thank you. Oh, look at you.
Hi, thank you so much for coming and speaking to us. You talked about being a leader to your friends, and I'm sure you are now also. So I like that you said that everyone can be a leader, and a lot of us are leaders to our friends right now because that's the way we can be. So what would you suggest when you're trying to lead a group that you know so well, while still maintaining those relationships and keeping it like professional and working?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's not always easy to leave friends, right? It can be a tough challenge. And I think it's, it's trying to gather consensus where it's possible. You're not always going to agree on everything, right? But it's making sure that each person feels heard, that their voice is heard. And, sort of at times you have to set boundaries of what your role is. And I think many people who get promoted find themselves in that situation, and all of a sudden you're now managing people that used to be their peer and your friends, and it's awkward. So I don't think there's any getting away from it, but I think, when I first got promoted, I remember I didn't want to move my office. So it's like, here I got this way bigger office, and HR's like, need to move today. I'm like, no, like I have so much stuff and I want to take my time. And they were like, no, it was the perception, right? Like you need to move into that office so everybody understands you're the VP of the department. So I think it is sort of practicing it in action and knowing that you are going to be uncomfortable at times, and that's okay.
Thank you both for coming. So you guys. So just kind of curious, and this might be a little more tactical than philosophical, but we touched on the idea of leadership style. So what specifically did you do to kind of think about leadership style? Like, I know kind of in the mid-level, probably when you first like start to think about leadership style and like how you kind of garner your own, and it's a question I've kind of had on my mind. So I'm curious how you maybe reflected or what you specifically did to think about what worked for you and how did you kind of come into your leadership style? Okay.
Yeah. You go, girl.
So, I mean, I became a director this past year, but before that, I had managed, one or two young women prior. And I think it's a lot about trial and error. There's no rule book. I know Lori handed me a book that said the making of a manager, but there really is no right way. And I think every person you manage is different. So you kind of have to learn a little bit about their working style, their work ethic, and balance, even though we don't like that word, with your own. And, there's times that I need to be a little bit more hands-on, and then there's times that I can pull my hands off and let my team do the work. But with that being said, also being a leader, you do have to trust your team and you have to empower them and make them feel comfortable to make decisions as well. So I try to, balance those two things, and then also, empower them to do what they came to do and hope that I've taught them enough to make them successful as well.
I think for me, it was, either emulating or not various leaders that I had seen in action. You know, that for me, when working at bigger companies like Revlon or Coty and being around so many different female leaders, there were ones that I aspired to be like, and there were ones that I said, I don't want to be anything like them. And so I looked at them and I sort of studied them and how they approached meetings, their teams, things like that. And I also did a lot of internal networking. You know, I would reach out people who were levels above me, but not in my department, and ask them for coffee and really pick people's brains. This job, when I became the president of Parlux, I'd never been president of a company before. I was a marketer my whole career, you know, ended as a senior VP, executive VP of marketing, but I never ran a company. I went and met with other female presidents of smaller, mid-sized companies, and I said, what were some of your greatest challenges? What were your greatest opportunities? How did you lead? I think one of the hardest parts of any job is managing people. Everybody's different and trying to figure out what makes people tick, right? Some people want a title, some people want money, some people want visibility, some people want to be in the know, some people just want opportunity, and everybody's different. And so trying to get into the psyche of my team and make sure that I'm delivering on their needs is something I'd like to put on this. But it's just a lot of really just reaching out and picking people's brains and asking lots of questions and then figuring out what of that do I feel works for me and fits with my style.
Feedback on that. What do you offer when you're asking to meet with people? Like, because time is valuable, how do you book people to meet with you and speak about, open up? How to move on?
Okay, people above me.
People above me, yeah, I mean. They were mostly people I knew internally in the organization already. And I basically said, I'm really interested in your career. People love to be flattered. I've learned that already. So I think if you can find a particular hook, something that they've done, something in their career, whether it was at, say, I was Coty, at the company or externally, and say, I would love to just pick your brain about X, Y, Z. I think if you just leave it very open-ended, people feel like, I don't even need, people want to reach out to me, and I know everyone wants a job, and if I don't have a job, I'm immediately like, oh, I'd love to talk to them, but I don't have a job for that. So I think if you can find something that you have in common or something you really want to learn from them, and you can give something like, I just gave this advice to someone the other day, totally different topic, but she's looking for a job, and she's like, what do I do? And I said, honestly, every single week, new beauty brands are launching an Ulta and Sephora. I would go in there every week, look at who's launching, look at the new products, look at their displays, look at their ad campaigns, and then I go right to all those people, find everyone who works at that company and write them on LinkedIn and talk about their launch, talk about their products, talk about their ad campaigns. I go, there's a reason when people say you would know that they want to network with you or they want 15 minutes of your time, but you give them something specific, a hook to wrap around, and they know you've invested in them. It shows that you've done your homework, you've done your research. So I think if you can find that book or something to really give someone that reason to meet with you, I think that makes it, people want to give their time a little bit more. That extra stuff.
Hi, first of all, thank you so much for taking the time to inspire all of us in this room. And of course, thank you so much, Professor, for bringing us this opportunity. And what I wanted to ask is, this is one of the things that I believe personally, that is most vital to becoming a leader, that is skills like empathy. And I know we talked about it, and I wanted to ask, so sometimes when life happens, when people come to us, how do you differentiate and how can you be responsible to both your team as well as the work? Of course, for sometimes, for people life happens, but also you have to get the work done. So how do you, that's a very thin line, I believe, and how do you balance between that?
Yeah, life does happen, and like I said before, for me, it is a business, but we are people and we're real people, and family, health, those things come before everything. So if something happens, then someone else has to pick up their work. Then I'm gonna ask someone to go the extra mile to help their peer, their coworker, so that they can take the time for what they need to do, just like I would expect vice versa. Those are my expectations. That's what I would do because I would want someone to do that for me. So I'm a firm believer in that, like, work hard, but when you come back from whatever you need to take care of, then I expect you to pay it forward and help your peers and yours. And that's kind of how I believe. That's when I talk about my heart and my head. It's really important to me.
Hi, thank you so much for coming tonight. I'm curious if you have any advice or experience with dealing with imposter syndrome as a leader, because like that's something that I get sometimes and I'm sure we all get. So I'm wondering how you sort of reset yourself and dig deep to find your confidence and say, I am qualified for this, I can do this.
It's a great question.
I love that
And
question.
it happens at every level. It most certainly does. There are times I'm like, do I really know what I'm doing? You know? And I think it's just taking a step back. And again, it goes back for me, that preparation, like go back to remind yourself of what you do know, of what you have accomplished, of why you are qualified, you know, dig deep inside yourself. And sometimes even, you know, if you have a trusted friend that's, you know, that you, a peer, a friend, someone in the industry, maybe not someone in your own company, but for me, I have a lot of former colleagues who were peers in other jobs and they've gone other places. And sometimes it's like, you know, I just need to have coffee with you or a cocktail or whatever, and you should just be like, wait, I'm spinning a little bit here, and sometimes you need someone else to help remind you that you are qualified, because it does happen to all of us.
Yeah, I'd just like to make it, go ahead. Who go first?
No, I think of it even a little bit tonight, right? I'm like, wow, that's my name. Like maybe that's a little bit of imposter syndrome too, but you know, I prepared with Lori. She's been my mentor for the last 15 years. I'm director in beauty, and just remind yourself and ground yourself and, you know, trial and error also. If all else fails, just try.
Believe in yourself.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think there's a little imposter syndrome in all of us, right? You take a new job, you don't really know that job, you're well qualified for that job, you sure don't know that job. And I think at every level, yeah, I run a consulting firm and every client I have, I feel a little bit like an imposter, because they want different things or they want different expertise. But in the end, it's there. It's just a matter of here for it. Grounding yourself into what you do know and realizing that life is it's lifelong learning. It's lifelong learning. The minute you stop learning, that's the minute you really start growing. So yes, I think we're all a little bit of an imposter at different points of life, for sure. Yes. Hey.
So thank you. Thank you guys so much. You've shared so many great insight. So many like positive insights about leadership and what it's like to be a leader. But I kind of wanted to touch on the negatives a little bit more. More so about what it's like to deal with a difficult leader, and how do you, just basically survive that situation. I'm sorry if you have been in a situation like that where you've had a very difficult leader and your thoughts or your ideas aren't being well received, or you just can't really push through. So any thoughts and advice on that?
Sure. I definitely had situations.
That's a great question.
It is a good question. It is a good question. I had a leader once and there were 3 VPs who reported to this leader, and I used to joke it was like a clock. Like one of us was always on the way down, one of us was in the show, and one of us was on the way up, and it kind of just rotated. You never know where you were gonna be. And so it was sort of trying to get in their psyche a little bit and figure out what pushed your buttons and what were the reasons that you couldn't get your ideas forward at that time. And I'll go back to preparation. If you're prepared, if you know your stuff, like there are facts that people can't dispute, right? So I think if you can feel the confidence in that, and then there's always subjective things, like Dara talked about. I mean, some of the things we do are subjective, whether a fragrance smells good, whether an ad campaign is good or not. I mean, there's no right or wrong answer. So I think it's also developing thick skin so that you don't take it personally. But it's also evolving in how you are an asset to them. So, you know, I also have a saying where I say, the people who report to me should be taking the monkey off my back. Meaning, they shouldn't be helping take a problem off my back, not adding problems to, it, right? And if they're not taking things off my back, then they shouldn't be one of my direct reports. So I just would try to find ways of how I can help to take problems off of her shoulders, how I can add value to her. And I just kept, some of it's trial and error, just keep working. And sometimes I would have an open conversation and say, hey, doesn't feel like we're jiving here. What can, my job is to make you look good, to make you better, to make you successful. That is what each employee's job is. You want to make your boss look good to their boss, right? What can I do differently? And I think sometimes being proactive with those questions and really asking, like, being in someone's face to say that, hey, like, I'm not feeling it. So please tell me, what can I do differently that will make you, you know, make your job easier, make you happier, make this work relationship better? I think that was very much today.
Thank you all for being here. My question is about values because I feel like so many of us currently are in the early trajectories of our career. We're going to be shifting around a lot. I know that's kind of what my position is right now, and I'm so easily swayed in looking for new opportunities by title or by opportunity or by the company name itself. But I've kind of redirected and thinking about how do I want to build my values in the future and how do I want that to kind of serve my future rather than so easily to get swayed by shiny things. So I was wondering, how did you guys define your values and your leadership styles, and kind of was it trial and error, or and how did you set that?
I mean, first of all, I would say, don't get caught in titles. Titles are not everything. I promise you that. Sometimes a lateral move with the same title is the best learning experience that you'll ever have. So I wouldn't get caught up in that. What's most important is that you're learning. Is that you're learning and you're growing and you're happy. At the end of the day, you do spend a lot of time at work. Like, you need to love what you do. You need to be happy doing what you're doing. As far as sort of that bright shiny object, I think, you know, coming to Parlux was an example of that. You know, I was sort of at the top of my game at Cody. Mark Jacobs was on fire when I started on the business. It was $50 million. When I left, it was $250 million. Mark Jacobs Daisy is an iconic fragrance, you know, bestseller today. And I was at sort of a turning point in my career where I was at the top of the marketing chain at Cody. Either I could move to another brand in the Cody umbrella and do the same thing. Didn't really excite me. I could go to Estee Lauder and do the same thing there. I could, you know, I was looking at all the different things that I can do. And basically the opportunity of Parlux came up. And before I joined, we had a portfolio of probably, you know, 10 to 15 brands. And some of them were a little dusty. And Parlux wasn't the brightest, shiniest object out there. And I will be honest with you, I let my ego and my vulnerability kick in. And I was worried what people were going to think. That Lori singer who goes up on stages and gets her Fifi Award every year, like she's going to Parlux. And it was hard for me, but I knew that I was going because I was going for a title, not for the title, but for the learning of running a company, right? I learned to be a marketer for 30 plus years, but I went for the opportunity. I wasn't going to become president of Estee Lauder, Lori. That's probably not my experience. But it took a lot of soul searching and a lot of conversations to really kind of make me okay with it, for my values, to not let my ego get in the way, that it wasn't this fancy company and it wasn't, you know, but I look back now and in 6 years, you know, I signed Billie Eilish, I signed Drake, I signed LeBron, we launched a grooming brand, Sam Edelman, like they just keep coming. And I'm so proud of the double-digit growth that Parlux has had. And now we are a player in the industry. We might not have been 6 years ago, so I'm really proud of that. But I think sometimes it's just soul searching and it's putting your priorities forward. No one can decide what's right for you but you.
And I'll add to that you do, I guess you don't have to love what you do at first, and that part might be trial and error, but when you do find something you love doing, it all just kind of clicks at the same time. Like your values will align, you'll just be happy, but it's definitely not about the title or, you know, the Fortune 500 top companies. I also, you know, I was in the beauty industry and I left for a little bit to go into the home category. And I really quickly learned, even though I took a raise or a increase in pay and had a new title at this home brand company, I didn't end up being happy because I wasn't somewhere where I was passionate about or somewhere I felt like I was learning. So I think that's important as well.
Well, okay, well, I guess, there are no more questions. We'll be around.